The air in the Hayes Innovations boardroom was stale with the scent of old coffee and quiet ambition. It was 2013, and the Austin tech scene, nicknamed Silicon Hills, was buzzing with energy and venture capital. Outside the polished windows, the city was a hive of startups and innovation, a stark contrast to the conservative atmosphere inside the family-run company. Ethan Hayes stood at the head of the long mahogany table, his heart pounding a rhythm of hope and anxiety against his ribs. On the projector screen behind him, the sleek logo of his project, a revolutionary AI-driven data analytics platform, glowed. He had poured 2 years of his life, countless sleepless nights, and every ounce of his brilliance into this. He believed it was the key to pulling Hayes Innovations out of its slow decline and launching it into the modern tech landscape. His father, Arthur Hayes, sat at the opposite end of the table, his face a mask of stern indifference. Beside him, Ethan's older brother, Derek, leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. Derek, the designated heir and VP of operations, had always seen Ethan as the creative type, a dreamer unfit for the cutthroat world of business. This dynamic is a common source of conflict in family-owned businesses, where roles and succession plans are often blurred by personal relationships. Ethan moved through his presentation with practiced confidence, his voice earnest as he explained the algorithms, the market potential, the future. He saw the platform not just as code, but as a living, breathing brain that could predict market trends with unparalleled accuracy. When he finished, the silence was heavy and suffocating. Arthur cleared his throat, his gaze dismissive. He didn't address the data or the projections. Instead, he spoke about tradition, about the company's legacy, and about the risks of chasing fantasies. Derek chimed in, his tone dripping with condescension, calling the project a vanity project and a financial black hole. He used phrases like unproven and academically interesting, but practically useless. The other board members, loyalists to his father and brother, shifted uncomfortably but nodded in agreement. The dismissal was not just professional, it was deeply personal, a public reinforcement of Ethan's lifelong position as the family outsider. The vote was a mere formality. Ethan's project was unanimously rejected. The following week was a blur of quiet humiliation. He was stripped of his projects and reassigned to meaningless tasks. His colleagues avoided his eyes in the hallway. The final blow came on a Friday afternoon. He was summoned to HR and handed a termination letter. The official reason was professional incompetence. The unspoken message was clear. He was no longer part of the family or the business. He packed his personal belongings into a small cardboard box, a few books, a picture frame, a worn-out coffee mug. As he walked through the office he had helped build, past the people he had considered colleagues, he felt a cold, hard knot of betrayal solidify in his chest. He didn't look back as he pushed through the glass doors and stepped out into the Texas heat, the weight of the box in his arms feeling much lighter than the weight of his family's treachery. The betrayal sent Ethan into a freefall, but he didn't stay down for long. He landed in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment in a less glamorous part of Austin, the city's vibrant energy feeling more like a taunt than an inspiration. The polished world of Hayes Innovations was gone, replaced by peeling paint and the hum of a faulty refrigerator. He took his modest life savings, every dollar a painful reminder of his past life, and poured it into building something new. This is a classic bootstrapping phase for a startup, where founders use their own money because they have no other choice. The first few months were a brutal grind. Think 18-hour days fueled by instant noodles and cheap coffee, with the glow of his laptop screen being his main source of light. It was a lonely existence, but the fire of betrayal and the desperate need to prove everyone wrong was a powerful motivator. He wasn't just coding. He was building a weapon. He refined his AI platform and crafted a business plan, preparing for the next battle, finding investors. The rejections were swift and constant. He sent hundreds of emails to venture capital firms and angel investors, but the response was almost always silence. It's a tough reality that less than 1% of startups actually secure venture capital funding, so the odds were stacked against him. Each no felt like his father and brother were laughing at him all over again, but his idea was too good to ignore forever. Two of his most talented former colleagues, a brilliant programmer named Maya and a sharp data scientist named Ben, reached out. They had quit Hayes Innovations in disgust shortly after he was fired, tired of the stagnant, risk-averse culture. They believed in Ethan's vision. Their arrival was like a shot of adrenaline. Suddenly, the lonely apartment transformed into a bustling, albeit chaotic, headquarters. Whiteboards covered the walls, and tangled cables snaked across the floor. They officially formed Nexus AI, a name symbolizing their mission to connect data in revolutionary ways. Together, they were a powerhouse trio. After 6 grueling months, they finally got a nibble. A small boutique VC firm known for making bold bets on disruptive tech agreed to a meeting. They saw what Ethan's family couldn't: the future. The seed investment they offered wasn't huge, but it was everything. It was validation. It was a lifeline. More than the money, it gave Ethan the unshakable belief that he was on the right path, and his journey for redemption had truly begun. 5 years passed in a blur of code, contracts, and calculated silence. By 2018, Nexus AI was no longer a scrappy startup. It had become a silent giant in the data analytics world, a private powerhouse with a client list that included a growing number of Fortune 500 companies. They operated from a sleek, minimalist office in a different part of Austin, a space that buzzed with the quiet confidence of success. Ethan, however, remained a ghost. He intentionally avoided the spotlight, turning down interviews and tech conference keynotes. His name never appeared in headlines. While other tech CEOs built personal brands, Ethan built an empire in the shadows. Meanwhile, Hayes Innovations was crumbling. Under Derek's leadership, the company had become a relic. Their technology was hopelessly outdated, and Derek's conservative strategy had led them to lose major contracts to more agile competitors, companies exactly like Nexus AI. The company was bleeding money, propped up by loans and drowning in debt. Their decline was a slow, painful spectacle, chronicled in the financial pages that Ethan read every morning with a grim sense of satisfaction. From his position of strength, Ethan began his attack. It wasn't a loud declaration of war, but a campaign of stealth and precision. Here's the breakdown of his strategy. He first established a series of shell corporations. These are legal companies that exist only on paper, with no real operations, often used to hide the true owner's identity during complex transactions like a hostile takeover. Think of it as sending in a team of spies under different covers before the main assault. Through these anonymous companies, he began a creeping takeover. This is a real-world tactic, where an acquirer gradually buys up a target company's shares on the open market to gain control without alerting management or causing the stock price to spike. Each purchase was a small, patient step in a much larger, perfectly orchestrated plan. At the same time, he used an investment fund to start buying up the debt of Hayes Innovations from banks. This is a serious power move. When you own a company's debt, you essentially become their banker. And if they're in financial trouble, you can gain significant influence over their decisions. His father and brother had no idea that the enemy wasn't just at the gates. He was already inside, dismantling their defenses one brick at a time. Ethan was no longer the dreamer they had cast out. He was the architect of their downfall. The end for Hayes Innovations came not with a bang, but with the quiet panic of a company bleeding out. They were on the brink of bankruptcy, a fact that could no longer be hidden. Panic had finally shattered the arrogant calm in the executive suite. Arthur, aged and worn down by the failure, and Derek, whose confidence had curdled into raw desperation, were scrambling for a lifeline. They were trying to find a buyer, any buyer, to salvage what was left of their legacy. Then, an offer emerged from a private investment fund. It was generous, suspiciously so. To Arthur and Derek, it felt like a miracle. In reality, This is a sharp tactic in acquisitions. A generous offer can ensure a quick, clean sale and prevent the target company from shopping around for other deals. They were so desperate that they didn't question their good fortune. They just saw a way out. Behind the scenes, the deal moved with ruthless speed. The investment fund was, of course, Ethan's primary weapon. Using a fund or a series of shell companies is a classic way to mask the true identity of the buyer in what is essentially a hostile takeover. Arthur and Derek had no idea they were negotiating with the very person they had exiled. The fund's lawyers and accountants, who had been preparing for this moment for years, finalized the due diligence in record time. The transaction was a masterstroke of corporate rating. The fund executed a tender offer, directly approaching shareholders to buy their stock, and consolidated all the debt it had secretly acquired. In a matter of weeks, it was done. With the stroke of a pen, Ethan's fund became the majority shareholder, giving him absolute control. His name was still nowhere on the paperwork. The trap had been sprung perfectly. From his own office across town, Ethan watched the confirmation flash on his screen. There was no celebration, just a cold, quiet sense of purpose. His lawyers immediately sent a single, formal communication to the remaining board members of Hayes Innovations. It was a summons for an emergency meeting the next morning. The agenda was simple and ominous: to introduce the new ownership and discuss the company's future. The checkmate was complete. All that remained was for the ghost to finally show his face. The Hayes Innovations boardroom was thick with the scent of stale coffee and failure. It was the exact same room, with the same long mahogany table where Ethan had been publicly humiliated 5 years ago. Now it felt less like a boardroom and more like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. Arthur and Derek sat at the table, their usual arrogance replaced by a raw, visible anxiety. The other board members, the same ones who had voted to oust him, fidgeted and avoided looking at each other. They were all waiting to meet the faceless new owner who had bought their company out from under them. The door swung open and the room fell silent. It wasn't a team of lawyers who walked in. It was Ethan. He was no longer the hopeful young dreamer in a slightly rumpled suit. He was sharp, composed, and wore a tailored suit that radiated quiet power. He moved with a chilling self-assurance that instantly sucked all the air out of the room. It was like they were seeing a ghost, but this ghost owned the haunted house now. Derek's jaw literally dropped, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Arthur, his father, seemed to shrink. The color draining from his face as he stared at the son he had disowned, now returned as his conqueror. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence was his power. He walked to the head of the table, the seat of power that had once been his father's, and placed a sleek leather briefcase on the polished wood. He opened it, not with a flourish, but with a calm, deliberate motion, and took out a single thick stack of documents. He slid the stack across the table. It stopped right in front of his father. The top page was a termination notice for Arthur Hayes. Beneath it was one for Derek, and then one for every single board member who had voted against him. This is a standard and critical first move after a successful hostile takeover. The new majority shareholder immediately removes the old board to consolidate control and implement a new vision. It's not just drama, it's a legal and strategic necessity to prevent any further opposition. There were no fiery speeches or emotional accusations. His revenge wasn't a hot-headed scream. It was a cold, perfectly executed business equation that had just been solved. The termination papers were his final verdict. He had returned not as a son seeking validation, but as a consequence they never saw coming. 6 months after the takeover, the name on the building changed, but it was more than just a new sign. The company, now rebranded as Nexus Hayes, was undergoing a renaissance. This wasn't just an acquisition. It was a true merger of strengths. Ethan orchestrated a symbiosis integration, a strategy where the best parts of both companies are combined to create something stronger. He fused the agile, innovative spirit of his startup with the vast resources and established infrastructure of the old company. The first order of business was talent. He immediately rehired the brilliant engineers and forward thinkers who had been pushed out or left in frustration under his brother's risk-averse leadership. He brought back the company's soul. This move was critical for creating a new, unified culture built on a shared vision. He established clear communication channels and involved employees in shaping the new environment, ensuring the transformation was a collaborative effort. The result was a workplace that valued bold ideas and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the stagnant, hierarchical culture his father had built. One evening, Ethan stood alone in his new office, the very same one where he had been cast out. The city lights of Austin twinkled below, a sprawling map of his new reality. He didn't feel a sense of gloating or bitter triumph. Instead, a quiet, profound sense of satisfaction settled over him. The years of grinding, the loneliness, the constant rejections, it had all led to this moment. He had proven his point not with angry words or public callouts, but with decisive action and undeniable success. The merger wasn't just about reclaiming his birthright, it was about building a better version of it. He had created a new dynasty, not inherited one. He had built his empire on his own terms, and now he was ready to lead it into the future.